Is it wrong for Israel to have just recently turned off the water, the electricity in Gaza, now that the ceasefire is over and they are still holding many Israeli hostages? That's the debate that is going on here with Piers Morgan. And Piers Morgan, once again, pulls at the heartstrings of people by talking about the little children who are being killed. Now, you also know that America just bombed Yemen very heavily. And yes, there were innocent people that died, tens and tens of innocent people that died. Should America have done that or not? Right? Or do we say that, no, we should let Yemen continue terrorizing the world, stopping our ability fair trade and travel ships through seas, right? Which has enormous repercussions, and that we have then an evil entity controlling the world. So now we have our hands tied. Or do we say that we are going to do what we have to break them down, and that comes at the cost, tragically, of innocent people being killed? This is the convoluted thinking of people who claim to be moral when they say that you should not turn off electricity. It's very simple. You want the electricity? Give us every single hostage back. Very simple. That's all. We're happy. We are not the aggressors. We're happy for you to have your electricity. Give us back the hostages, which you aggressors have taken and who are torturing every single day. Here's this debate.
Okay, Dave, I want to just, before we finish, just mention the fact that you came after me big time on X this week in a furious onslaught. And Brianna, to my astonishment, leapt to my defense.
I believe I said the word respectfully, Piers.
Well, Brianna leapt to my defense, actually, on X. So let's play this out on my show, where I have more control over your outburst. No, to be serious, it was an interesting point, really, because the point I was making is about Israel cutting off the power into Gaza. I actually did not know the full answer to the questions I was raising, is the honest truth, which is, well, how much power in Gaza comes from Israel? It turns out more than 50% does. It also turns out that pretty much from the start of the war, so October 2023, the power has been cut by 90%. And my question when they cut the rest off this week was, if you think about how this ends, all this, and hopefully sooner rather than later, and you get to a stage where you can move forward and you try and rebuild things and everything else. The point I was making was, Dave, and I'm interested in what you say to this, do the Palestinians not just have to have the basic same fundamental rights to things like their own power, their own water, their own food supplies, all these kind of things, without Israel having the ability, ironically, the power, if you like, to just yank it whenever they feel like it? And I know the history, because I've studied it. I know that this was the deal that was done, and they claim it back from the Palestinian Authority, from taxation on the Palestinians and so on. I know all that. But it just seems to me, until the Palestinians can honestly say to themselves, we have the same human rights as our Israeli neighbors, you're never actually going to get rid of the problem.
Well, as I said to you on Twitter, I think my exact quote was, Piers, respectfully, I think you're confused about the issue. But what you just said there was actually closer to the truth, because you're right. It's the Palestinians who have to look at the Palestinians and figure out what they want. Remember, Israel withdrew from Gaza in 2005. There is not one Jew in Gaza until October basically 9th of 2023, after October 7th. They wanted not only nothing to do with Gaza, they wanted to leave them to self-rule. They said, we'll take they had 8,000 citizens there. They said, we'll take everyone out. Hitler would have loved the place, totally Judenrein, right? And they said, do what you want. There was no blockade. By the way, no one ever talks, and I did tweet this to you, no one ever talks about how Egypt has a border with Gaza. Gaza was part of Egypt before 1967. Egypt's wall, maybe your guys can pull it up when you post this, the wall that Egypt built with Gaza is massive and has trenches and barbed wire and cement and everything else. Israel, I've been there to the kibbutzes that were largely destroyed. They had a simple chain link fence like you might have around a dog park. Yes, I completely agree. In 2005 and for the last 15 plus years, almost 20 years, they have had a chance using the same exact set of border there that is the same beach as Tel Aviv to build the most prosperous, wonderful society where all of their oil-rich Arab brothers could have put in tons of money, and they could have spit in the eye of the Jews and said, look what we have built in Gaza. Instead, they took everything, not only just the money. They took literally the pipes that were bringing them water to turn it into rockets.
Okay, but Dave, I would say this to you.
So,
okay, but let me say this, though. I would say this. I hear you, right? And I've read a lot of this in the last 24 hours to just inform myself really about the reality of all this. But look at the situation in Gaza where you have 50% of the population's under 18, so 50% are kids. We know that many, many thousands, let's not get into the exact number because everyone always goes, it's not that, it's this. But we know many, many thousands of children have died, innocent children who've got nothing to do with this. And they've died. Turning off the power into Gaza, given the state of Gaza right now.
Release the hostages, Piers. That's the answer. Release the hostages.
I agree.
Piers, if your wife got killed and your daughter was kidnapped, release the hostages, and then I'll come on this show and tell you Israel should leave them alone.
I agree. Every hostage should be released, and Hamas are a despicable terror organization. I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about the innocent children, more of whom will now die inevitably because power's been completely cut off in Gaza, which led me just to ask, I don't think Israel should have that power to do that.
Israel doesn't
Piers,
want
you're 100%
that power.
correct.
Israel shouldn't feed them or give them electricity or anything else.
Allow me, please.
Where are the Egyptians? Where are the Qataris?
Piers, well,
Where is
I
the
thought this was
Arab
the
members or the
Palestinians.
Hang on,
Jordanians?
don't talk at once. All right, Emily,
Okay.
Emily, then Brianna, then Joe.
Okay. You keep going to the root of the problem. You said, why does Israel have the power, which you said is not 100% of the power over their electricity, but let's say over 50% in controlling their, electricity? The question is, well, why do they have that power? Israel, by the way, including the United States and many Arab countries, have sent billions of dollars to Gaza, as Rubin said, to build infrastructure, hospitals, schools, and instead they build terror tunnels and they build rocket launchers in nurseries. And Hamas
Israel
HQ
bombed
is
the
under Al-Shifa
infrastructure.
Hospital.
Israel has
and they spent,
reportedly bombed the power plant.
Because, as I just said, the infrastructure is used as terrorist HQs. Terrorist HQs are built, not infrastructures. Even their hospital is corrupted.
So now Israel can
Even their hospitals are Hamas
critical
headquarters.
Infrastructure.
So do me a favor with Gaza's infrastructure.
I'm glad
They
you
don't
said
have
that,
critical
Emily.
infrastructure. They built terror
what Israel
tunnels.
has done.
Brianna, you're hysterical. Let me speak. Save your hysterics for later.
Critical infrastructure in Gaza.
Say your point.
Terrorist activity. Bomb it. Kill people, and then after the fact do these investigations that don't get covered on shows like these that demonstrate that there was absolutely no proof that there were terrorists or Hamas in the institutions that got bombed.
Go to Al-Shifa Hospital.
When Gaza,
Al-Shifa Hospital,
when the IDF
terrorist HQ. Baby nursery.
Listen, it's hard to hear you when you're both talking. Hang on, ladies. I can't hear either of you because you're both talking at the same time. So I would simply say, well, Joe, I'll come to you, Joe, but my point remains that on a humanitarian level, given the scale of child death in this war in Gaza, it seems to me inhumane. And yes, I accept Hamas are inhumane. I accept the keeping of any hostages is inhumane. But it can also, but all these things. Hang on, don't all start again. But it can also be inhumane to turn off all the power and to stop the fuel going in now, which will only lead to more children dying. That's my point, Joe.
Piers, how do they prevent the power being turned off?
Piers, I'm so sorry.
Hang on. I don't remember you two being called Joe.
Piers,
Brianna, please.
I'm so sorry, Piers, but you raised this talking about my tweet. Am I able to talk about what my tweet actually said?
Yes, I'll give you the last word, Brianna. Let me just take 20 seconds. Sure. On October 7th, the governing entity of Gaza went to war against Israel. Give me another example in the history of war where the attacked country needs to pay for electricity for the country that declared war on them.
Okay.
There's no obligation that Israel should have to pay and supply the electricity to the country that went to war against them.
Yeah, have Zelensky give the Russians foreign aid while you're at it.
Wait, Piers, please, can I please address that exact point? Joe,
yes, you can. Quickly. We've got to wrap up quickly.
Point of misdirection. So for one, The mythology that Israel pays for the power is wrong. I think it's about $11 million that Gazans pay to Israel for that power that is taken out of tax collections from the people of Gaza. 2, Israel has repeatedly bombed the power infrastructure long before October 7th over the last decades to prevent Gaza from being able to be independent in its power, exactly so it can use collective punishment, which isn't just immoral, as you put it, Piers, but is in fact a war crime. And 3, the idea that there was a withdrawal from Gaza in 2005 and therefore it was independent and could thrive and grow and do what it wanted to do, but it chose not to become the next Dubai or whatever it is that Trump said, is a misnomer. Were Jews in the Warsaw Ghetto free just because Nazis withdraw and stood around on the edges? It is an occupied territory. It has been called an outdoor prison, and that is the reality of the situation. It is not free. There are not permeable borders. It is the most policed and surveilled population on the planet, and that is why there was the attack on October 7th.
Okay, everyone, look, the bottom line is, in the Oslo Accords, Israel said they would supply, and they weren't paying for this privilege. They got the money back. They would supply water, power, and fuel, right? And they said they would do that. They made a conscious decision to stop that because, and the argument obviously is because we're at war. Hamas want to kill us. I get that, but there's still a humanitarian aspect to this, as there is in any war, and it seems to me to be an inhumane move
I would say,
to do
Piers,
this.
would you
and it's also a breach of the hostage exchange.
Let Dave respond to that.
I would say a good question, rather than relitigating all of that, would be that Sinai, which Israel used to control, by the way, and gave up for peace with Egypt, Sinai is about 10 times larger than Israel, not just Gaza, about Israel itself. I've been to Sinai. Almost nobody lives there. Egypt has a border. How about Egypt open up the border and let all the Gazans in? Why not?
Okay, if everyone's just moving from their ancestral homes, let's let the Zionists move there then. The problem is, if we really cared about the hostages, you wouldn't have Netanyahu flagrantly disregarding the ceasefire agreements and imperiling the lives of hostages, which is causing so many hostage families to protest Netanyahu. Because his goals and his administration's goals have been clear, which is to get rid of Gaza, to take over Gaza, to ethnically cleanse Gaza, to drive them out of the territory, just like Dave Rubin is describing doing right now. And as a consequence, they don't care about the hostage lives more than they do securing that territory.
And that is not only a war crime.
It's just another classic debate. Where there's just a basic logic which is lacking, and also what you hear also a lot is the people who are anti-Israel, they know why Israel is doing things. That the real reason, when people live a life where there's always that sinister real reason, these are people who don't trust anybody, right? And they always know better than you why you're doing what you're doing. I mean, obviously, it's driven really by an agenda, so that's what they have to come up with. But they say it enough times until they actually believe it. Very, very tragic. What Israel is doing, stopping the water and electricity, is 100% moral, and it's what they are obligated to do in order to get their hostages back.